However, there are presently no plans to introduce VDS for children aged 12 and below in community, public, preschool, and school settings. This is due to a combination of reasons, namely, children are less likely to develop severe illnesses when infected, and we want to preserve as much as possible universal access to holistic education for children.
Let me explain our thinking at this point in time. Of course, I caveat that by saying that whatever our considerations current at this point in time will subsequently have to take into the prevailing national posture and also the development of the virus and its mutation. At this point in time, we would very much like to have all our children be able to attend school and participate in as many of the core activities as much as possible. Now, having said that, of course, there are also activities beyond the core curriculum that may pose a higher risk to our students. And for those higher risk activities, we will then have to consider if differentiated measures will be required.
Today, under the Women's Charter, divorcing parties must prove the sole ground for divorce, which is the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage before a divorce is granted. To do this, they may cite one or more of the existing 5 facts. There are 3 fault-based facts of adultery, desertion, and unreasonable behavior, and 2 non-fault facts of separation of 3 years with consent and of 4 years without. Under the new Section 95A(1)(f) and subsection 6A, parties may rely on this 6th fact if they mutually agree that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. But this is not a simple handshake of a mutual agreement to divorce. Instead, parties will submit to the court the reasons leading them to conclude that their marriage has irretrievably broken down, the efforts made to reconcile, and considerations given to the arrangements to be made in relation to their children and financial affairs. We propose to 1. Enhance the marriage process and strengthen safeguards to protect the institution of marriage. 2. Strengthen therapeutic justice in the divorce process and ensure those affected by divorce are supported. And 3. Ensure the Women's Charter remains up to date.
No one goes into a marriage looking for divorce. But having decided to do so, one should be helped along as much as possible by the administration of the process. In this, the amendments provide a smoothing of the path once decisions have been made. I must say I'm not quite sure of the term therapeutic justice when referring to the amendments allowing for divorce by mutual agreement. To some, this is not about justice, but about the freedoms to enter into a contract and the exit clauses which we can choose to exercise. Whatever the name, I support this move, which I think accords respect and dignity to both parties.
With the introduction of divorce by mutual agreement, the requirements for divorce have arguably been relaxed. Should we then expect an increase in divorce rates? My second clarification on DMA is how the rights of the spouses and children will be safeguarded. The proposed Section 95, subsection 6, provides that the spouses must enter an agreement with certain requirements, which includes spelling out what considerations they have given to sorting out their financial affairs and any child of the marriage. I'm concerned about the risk that the parties may enter an agreement which is unfair to one spouse or not in the best interests of the children.
I would also like to assure Ms. Sylvia Lim that we do not expect the number of divorces to increase significantly with the introduction of DMA. Spikes or long-term increase in divorce rates occur when a regime switches from fault-based to non-fault-based. We had made this transition in 1980 from a purely fault-based regime to a hybrid regime with no fault grounds, and we had introduced a simplified divorce track in 2015. We saw no significant increase in divorce then. If passed in Parliament, we expect all the marriage-related amendments and some of the divorce-related amendments to come into effect in the later half of this year, while others, such as DMA, would come into effect in 2023. to allow time for the courts, lawyers, social service agencies, and other parties to be ready. Our families are key building blocks of society, and we must do what we can to ensure that they are protected and strengthened. I believe that viewed holistically, these proposed amendments to the Women's Charter relating to marriage and divorce will strengthen the institution of marriage and support families should they have to pursue divorce as a last resort.
With effect from 15th January, the unvaccinated will not be allowed to go back to their workplace even if they tested negative. I'm particularly disturbed by this latest measure that puts the livelihoods of the unvaccinated at risk. What is the justification for preventing the unvaccinated from returning to their workplace? It is not for fear of infecting others, because vaccination does not stop the transmission of COVID-19. The risk is therefore mainly to themselves, not others. They bear the brunt of their decision not to vaccinate. It is often said that punishment must fit the crime. The same principle should apply to non-criminal actions as well. The consequences that we seek to impose should fit the action. In making the choice between the risk of COVID infection and the risk of adverse effects of vaccination, and where the risk falls primarily on themselves, is the loss of livelihood a befitting penalty? This ban on the unvaccinated returning to their workplace and thus risking their livelihoods is too harsh. Even though the government has asserted that every effort will be made to enable them to work from home, this is not always practical for every job affected. The new measure is essentially licensed to terminate. We urge the government to rescind the ban on the unvaccinated returning to their workplace from 15th Jan and commit to not imposing VDS on children for at least another 12 months.
It is important to note that non-fully vaccinated persons who are infected with COVID-19 are more than 7 times more likely to become critically ill in ICU compared to those who are fully vaccinated. So although a small proportion of our population, they take up a disproportionate amount of medical and hospital resources and contribute to significant amount of workload of our hospital staff. These are not mere statistics. It is actual resources being drained because of people who fall ill because of COVID-19. In summary, increasing population immunity through vaccination and boosters reinforced with VDS has been integral to our COVID-19 response in protecting the vulnerable and ensuring that our healthcare system can cope with the incoming Omicron wave, as well as any future infection waves. Singapore is now in a better position to achieve our goal of being a COVID-19 resilient nation.